and they tell me we have amazing technology, and yet we still just can't get this right. We just can't get the governance down pat. We just can't quite figure out this compliance piece. We don't have that engaged workforce. What are we doing wrong? I think that one of the things that we're now seeing organizations realize is that it's not just all that technology. I think good on paper looks very, very tidy. I think good in practice, it's not perfect, but everyone feels really comfortable and they know what they're meant to be doing 100%. So the dreaded phase two never happens. Doesn't matter how great the intent is. Phase two never happens because we think about things like project fatigue. So I usually find that the biggest disconnect that's happening is around roles. I'm not talking bread rolls, I'm talking a role.
Okay.
Just for clarity, Dave. So I think I have a little bit of caution with all things AI. Love it passionately, but also have a healthy dose of caution when thinking about how we're using AI, and especially anything to do with payroll or our workforce. Is a double dose of caution is my general approach. But I think it's also going to make us think about what do robots do well and what do humans do well. And it's really going to change what our jobs look like and what we do and what we don't do.
Work is changing. That's not a prediction anymore. It's just Tuesday. And the leaders doing it well aren't the ones with all the answers. They're the ones asking better questions. I'm Dave Kenyon, and this is Evolving Workforce. Today we're talking about something that keeps a lot of HR, payroll and operations leaders up at night. Workforce governance, specifically why organisations that have invested in good systems still find themselves with accuracy problems, misaligned processes and accountability gaps. My guest is Stacey Kavanagh, founder of KJM Consulting, where she works with organisations to assess, design and improve their workforce systems and processes across time and attendance, payroll, HR. Stacey's worked across a huge range of environments and she has a knack for spotting exactly where things start to break, especially as organisation grows. She's also a contributor to Global Payroll Magazine, so she knows how to make this stuff accessible. Stacey, great to have you on Evolving Workforce.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Nice to have you here. We've spoken in person. We've spoken online, but not in person. So it's great to see you actually in the flesh. And with AI, yes, we're actually here in person.
Yes, good to see you're a real person. You're not a robot.
No, I'm not a robot, not as far as I know. So tell us about KJM and what you do and how you help organisations.
So KJM, we are an Australian-based technology advisory firm. So we work with organisations to help them understand when their tech's working for them, when it's not working for them, and hopefully help them to make some better technology-based decisions. So we are all based in Australia, so we understand Australian problems and what Australian firms are really dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Over the years, I'd say I've met with a lot of executives, a lot of leaders in organisations, and I really find the same themes come up in our conversations. And they tell me we have amazing technology, and yet we still just can't get this right. We just can't get the governance down pat. We just can't quite figure out this compliance piece. We don't have that engaged workforce. What are we doing wrong? We thought we bought the technology. It's all going to come to life now. So we really work closely with those organisations to help them understand what else they need to be thinking about. Technology is great and it solves a lot of problems, but also there's a lot that goes around that as well. And so we really help them with those conversations and with that thinking and how to roll those changes out across their organisation as well.
And as you were saying, yes, you've been in a lot of organisations over the last many years. What's the shift that you're seeing, particularly now in workforce management, governance?
I think that one of the things that we're now seeing organisations realise is that it's not just all that technology. So I think there was a definite thought process previously that we just needed to get the right technology. And if we got that right technology, then all of our problems would go away. And it was like overnight, we'd implement it, we'd go live, and then everything's going to be amazing. And to a degree, technology does brilliant things and can certainly change an organisation. But what I think I'm seeing a lot more now is the understanding that it's not the technology alone. It's everything else that wraps around that and supports the technology to really make it sing and really make it work for your individual organisation as well. So we're seeing organisations and leaders just really open up to the conversation and say, what do we need to do to make this technology successful? How do we need to make sure we're keeping on top of things as our business grows and scales? What do we need to be thinking about from our technology perspective? What do we need to be thinking about from our governance and our process perspective? And it's really changing a lot of those conversations. So no longer it's about what technology should I buy? Now it's, I've got this amazing technology. How can I use it? What can I do better to really work for my organization?
And so in terms of those organizations that you're working in, from your experience, what does good actually look like in actuality rather than theory?
Okay, so in theory, good looks very, very tidy. Okay, so we have very clear role definitions. We have very clean data. We have wonderful integrations. We know where our source of truth is. All of those things that we talk about a lot. We have policies that are in place and they're followed, right? All these good things that we're really aspiring to. But what I think organizations are starting to realize is that a lot of that is good intent, right? I think every single organization I've worked with over the years has had good intent. They go into especially a project and they have great intent. They have lots of enthusiasm. They have lots of amazing people on their team who really want to make this successful. I think where things start to really fall down and not look so good is when there's that handoff between design and execution. So what we thought was going to happen and then what's happening in reality. So I think when we think about good, I don't necessarily say that good is perfect. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a strange statement to make. Good doesn't mean we have to be perfect all the time. Good means that we know that we have the right systems in place. We know that we have processes that are supporting our people and supporting our business. And good means that as problems arise, we will deal with them and we know how to deal with them as well. So a lot of that comes down to those things like that ownership. So who's actually owning the technology or owning those processes? And what is the process that we're actually going to utilize to bubble some of these problems up to the surface as well and figure out a way to resolve them rather than things getting hidden away or just, I use very loosely, resolved by individuals in the organization as well. So I think good on paper looks very, very tidy. I think good in practice, it's not perfect, but everyone feels really comfortable and they know what they're meant to be doing. They know the processes that they can follow and they know that they're supported by the governance that's surrounding them in the organization as well.
And look, I've worked in workforce management systems and companies over the last 20 years, and I know that in some instances, you've implemented and it's like, oh yeah, we were going to do that next module next time, and that never gets done.
Yes.
And there's no sort of maintenance. So I think what you're alluding to there is where there needs to be some sort of maintenance and then passing on of information from, people leave. There's a continuity of information that needs to happen.
100%. So the dreaded phase two never happens. Doesn't matter how great the intent is. Phase two never happens because we think about things like project fatigue. We've run out of obviously funding. There's other priorities within the organization, et cetera, et cetera. So anything on that dreaded phase two list tends to often get, left behind, unfortunately. So it really is key to be thinking about how do we support the technology ongoing and what does this mean for our organization? So who's responsible for these things? What are we doing to upkeep the technology and make sure we keep ensuring it's aligned with our organization, with our overarching strategies, where our business is going? If we're thinking about things like, are we going to be scaling up as an organization? What does that mean for our technology? What does that mean for our people who are managing the technology? What does that mean for our supporting processes around that as well? So I think, as you said, it's really important to think about that longevity. And we have amazing people in our organization often who we think are irreplaceable. And unfortunately, when they leave, it does leave a really big hole as well. So what are we doing to prevent that? How are we getting in front of that? People will leave eventually, as upsetting as that may be for us. So what's our plan to make sure that we have things in place to keep things ticking along and keep things really at that optimal level that we're sort of aiming for as well?
It seems like you almost need a person that is responsible to make sure that continuity of information happens and that they're on track, and that's probably a bigger job than the CTO or that's where you come in, of course.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We can help with that, but it's definitely something that the organization needs to really be alive to and be thinking about that. So we often talk about succession planning more from the roles in an organization, but I like to think about it a little bit more from a technology perspective. So how are we making sure we're protecting and looking after the technology long term? And what are we doing to plan for the future and when things change as well?
And that sort of speaks to my next question, which is where is the biggest disconnect between what leaders think is happening and what actually is happening on the ground?
Yeah, so this one's really interesting because I don't know, this might surprise you, it might not surprise you. Tell me, okay? So I usually find that the biggest disconnect that's happening is around roles. I'm not talking bread rolls, I'm talking a role.
Okay.
Just for clarity, Dave. So what my role is, what I do within the organization, okay? And they are at its core quite simple in a lot of ways, okay? We all have roles. They're usually quite well defined across the organization. And they're incredibly important because when we think about what roles influence, it's things like security, access, it's things like compliance, it's pay, it's your performance, and how you're evaluated for your performance, all those kind of really critical business processes. And what I find is that leaders tend to think, yeah, we have these really well defined. We've probably got some amazing job descriptions that have been created and come out every time we employ a new person, and then we probably don't look at them again, to be honest. But what happens in reality in an organization is that things change. And so roles are the things that people don't think of that are really changing. So it might be someone moves into a hybrid role. It might be something like they start to pick up different duties or responsibilities in their role. And so suddenly what we thought their role was has actually really changed. And so things get really muddy, things get really messy. And I think there's a huge disconnect generally between what a leader thinks our workforce is doing and what our workforce is actually doing. And especially when we think about as those businesses scale up, what made sense as a small organization, a small team, maybe operating in one particular region or country, when we start to scale up and we start to see a lot more scale of those roles, there's all these little nuances that start to come in. So something that worked in a particular region doesn't work in another region. Something that worked when we were just delivering product A doesn't work when we're talking about product B. And we see those roles start to evolve. But if we're not keeping on top of that, that's something that gets really out of hand quickly. And when we think about things like compliance, so payroll compliance, obviously everything comes back to what that role is and what those responsibilities are that those employees are delivering. So really key area where I think we tend to not realize how disconnected things have become from what they look like on paper to what they are in our actual organization.
Yes, and when you talk about roles, that's really interesting because, I might be a payroll manager, but I might not necessarily see my role to champion all the changes that we need to put into the system to take into account the changes of the EBA or the awards or new legislation or just the growing needs of the organization. That's the IT, they should be doing that, but I should be championing that as the payroll manager or the rostering manager.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that, again, when we think about that as we scale up, right, everything starts to change. When we think about what we should be championing, what our priorities are in the business, or who we're responsible for, those are the first things that start to just fall apart a little bit as well. Then we lose a little bit of that clarity when we're thinking about, hang on, what should I be doing here? Now I have a little bit less clarity about what I should be doing now that there's more of me, for example. There's more people doing the same role as me, but in different regions. It really starts to muddy the water as well. And I think that really helps to make it very unclear to people what they should be doing and whose responsibility things are as well. So we think about payroll compliance, for example, always top of mind for every organization. Who's responsible for that? Who does that ultimately fall to be responsible for that as a process and as a business risk as well? So really key things to think about as an organization.
And which leads into the next question, which is that ownership of workforce outcomes across systems, teams, regions. Where does AI come into the picture here?
Oh, okay. So I think that when we think about ownership, we tend to think about it more as HR owns the HRIS system, for example, and technology might own access to systems, and payroll owns paying people, and it's very segmented, right? We have our silos that we all work within. But I think that when we're thinking about AI and when we're thinking about that overarching use case of AI, it's impacting every employee, I would say. I think that's a fairly, a sensible statement to make. All employees, I think, are impacted in some way or degree by AI, right? So it covers our entire workforce. So I think what we have to think about when we're thinking about AI is is thinking about who is going to be accountable for the integrity across the entire workforce and what that impact is to the workforce. So I think AI is brilliant in a certain range of things. It's good at spotting anomalies. It's good at doing repetitive work. It's very good at writing emails. I'll tell you that. I do like that. But I think when we think about AI and what it can do, when we're thinking about that workforce governance as well, I think what we need to think about is what part is AI going to do and what part are humans going to be doing? And that's a question that we have to ask ourselves about every element when we're bringing AI in. But I think especially from a workforce perspective, because I think it's really critical having that human element when we're thinking about workforce, when we're thinking about people, and especially when we're thinking about those risks where there are interpretations that apply. So things like that. Payroll compliance, we know that there's a lot of interpretation that goes into that, and that's something where perhaps AI doesn't always have the best strength because sometimes it changes its mind about things as well. So I think AI, we're going to start to see it creep in. We're going to see it helping us with things like detecting some risks, looking for anomalies, looking for things that should be brought to our attention as humans for us to then make evaluations on. So I think it's going to just keep gently changing what we do and how we do it. But we need to keep being alive to what can it do for us, but also what can't it do for us, and what should we make sure still stays firmly in those human hands as well.
So let's just dig into a couple of things that you said there. First of all, you talked about interpretations. And what you're talking about there is the interpretation of a particular award,
Yes.
the ways people should be paid,
Yeah.
or an enterprise bargaining agreement.
Correct.
And if you're purely putting that in the hands of AI, it may or may not adhere to those particular policies.
100%, because we know that when AI looks at something, it can look at it in different ways. And you can ask it the same question multiple times, maybe you ask it the same question on a different day, and it responds in a slightly different way. And it's not a set in stone kind of a response. And I think when we're looking for an interpretation, we're looking for a set in stone, this is what we're doing.
Yes.
So I think there's some amazing tools out there that I've seen recently where AI is really helping with some of those interpretation pieces. But I think there's also that balance between what is interpretation by perhaps AI and what is an interpretation where the human really needs to be responsible for that and needs to consider all of the context that goes around it as well. So I think I have a little bit of caution with all things AI. Love it passionately, but also have a healthy dose of caution when thinking about how we're using AI, and especially anything to do with payroll or our workforce is a double dose of caution is my general approach.
Of course. And, we're dealing with people's very sensitive information, their bank accounts, their home addresses, their contact details. Where have you seen some almost AI fails where people have uploaded to large language model public domains?
Yeah. So I've heard a lot about shadow AI. And so for those who might not be familiar, at its simplest form, it really is that everyone is using AI, but it may not be AI that's been approved by the workforce or by your workplace. Sorry. So usually most places will have a particular AI tool, or maybe multiple AI tools that have been approved. And these are okay for use, and they've considered what data is going to be used and how it's going to be used. But we all have things like ChatGPT. So most of us might have a subscription, or we might have that free access at home that we're using. And we go, that was really useful when I did X at home. So I've now got this problem at work and I'm going to just log into ChatGPT. And so we start to use our own non-sanctioned AI tools in the workplace. And it opens up a huge risk. So we start to hear about things like maybe data being uploaded into non-sanctioned AI tools. As someone who worked in compliance for many, many years, that's probably the thing that keeps me up the most at night, is thinking about these kind of scenarios. So I've certainly heard some stories of people doing things with data and afterwards realizing that maybe wasn't the right approach. Unfortunately, it's too late. Like most things with computers, once it's done, and it's really hard sometimes to claw back what we've done. So it can then be out there in the public sector, and we could have perhaps shared some data that we shouldn't have, for example. It's also things to think about, like when AI is using data to learn from as well. So obviously we have these learning models. And so thinking about what data is being input as well, that is being used to learn and think from. that also is something that keeps me up a little bit at night as well. What are we feeding these AI models? Are we giving some real thought to how we're controlling these things as well? But I think, it comes back to, are we actually very confident that all of our employees are only using those AI models that have been sanctioned and tested and approved by our organization? Or do we feel like there's some risk there that maybe they're using some other tools that they're perhaps more comfortable with as well?
And that leads me to my next question, we're going to play actually. We like to play a few games at Evolving Workforce.
Okay.
Three quick games before we end. And the first one's called Humans versus AI. And what does effective workforce governance actually look like? Not just in frameworks, but how should organizations operate day to day, and how much is that being handled by systems versus AI?
Ooh, okay, great question. So I think when I think about effective workforce governance, I think about it should be almost invisible, okay? So by that I mean that it should just kind of happen. It shouldn't be something you're thinking about all the time. It shouldn't be something that's getting in your way. It shouldn't be something that's loud. It should be something that's supporting the workforce and what they need to be doing. And what that means in practice is things like, if you have an anomaly, if you have an edge case that comes up, you know exactly what to do with it. That's a process. We're not going to hide it away. We're not going to make a decision and go, I hope that was the right decision. What we're going to do is follow the process. And we're going to, perhaps it's there's someone who's responsible for that particular process, and we're going to bubble that up to them. They'll make the decision, right? And so if we feel very supported as we go about our day-to-day activities, because we know that there is that governance behind it and we know what to do if something doesn't go right. I think what AI is excellent at is looking for risk and looking for anomalies. So I think there's going to be that part where AI is going to be looking for issues that it might be raising for us, but then the human to come in and actually analyze and look at, is this a problem? Is this not a problem? What is the action that I want to take? I think AI is going to find the problems and humans are going to solve them.
I like it. So we actually make the decision.
We make the decision, correct. But I think AI is going to be really good at finding the things that we need to make decisions about.
All right. So next, change your mind. What have you seen now that you've changed your mind about that in terms of workforce governance that maybe just a couple of years ago you had a different opinion?
Okay. All right. So tough question, because I don't change my mind a lot. I'm always right. Just ask my husband. Okay.
Yes.
But
sure.
Of course. But, okay, I might be showing my age a little bit here, Dave, okay, so be kind. But I remember back when the Modern Awards were going to be coming out. And we were incredibly excited, okay? So we were just like, this is going to change governance. This is going to change compliance, okay? This is a complete game changer for our nation, okay?
Was that 2014, something like that?
Yeah, roughly, just a smidgen before, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. So, a few years ago. We'll just go with a few, Dave. Just a few years.
Okay, we can edit that out, Stacey.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm still just a spring chicken here.
I can tell.
Yeah. So, getting really excited. Okay, so I can literally remember saying, I can't wait to read these new awards when they come out. Now that says something about me as well as a person, as an individual.
It does.
I was really excited. I was very excited to read these documents when they were coming out, and thinking about it, going, this is amazing, because now we're not going to have these disparate documents that sort of conflict with each other, people doing the same job in the same nation, but in a different state, for example, and being treated and paid very differently. So how great is it? We're all going to be aligned, everything's going to be the same, and we're going to know exactly how to pay our people. And how much simpler is this going to be when we're thinking about technology, when thinking about processes? We're all going to be so compliant, it's going to be amazing. And then we got these documents, and then I had a bit of a moment, and I was like, I don't know that that's much clearer. I don't know that that's actually made our lives easier. Okay, no, Stace, right? Have a positive mind frame about this. Let's go into it. And what I've found is that I actually think by trying to combine so many documents into one and have one overarching award that covers, across, a particular industry area, it's actually created so many nuances and so many little edge cases and so many confusing clauses that it's actually made it harder for us in a lot of ways. So I think about some of the awards that I used to work under and interpret, and I think actually they were a lot more straightforward than now what I'm working within as a framework. So I think that was my biggest change of mind, was I thought I can see the way forwards, and I can see how this is going to make our lives so much better, and it's going to make compliance so much easier for businesses. And now if I reflect on the past decade or so, I realized that, all we've actually talked about is how compliance just feels like it keeps getting harder and harder to get right and to understand what we're meant to be doing.
My heart goes out to you. I can
know.
imagine Stacey there, with the champagne bottle out.
Yes, I was ready. I was ready to
Yeah.
read that 100 or so pages of the
Yeah.
first one. And, it was a bit of a sad moment for me, but that's okay. I've recovered over the last decade or so.
Well done. Well done. So the next game is prediction and warning. One prediction about workforce governance in the future and then one warning.
Oh my goodness. Okay. If I'm thinking about workforce and I'm thinking about what's going to change, now stay with me. Okay. Robots. Now, you'll say robots are not new. All right, we've had robotics for a very long time, especially when we think about manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. Robots have been in our factories for a very long time. But I don't know if you watch a lot of social media. I do. And some of the amazing things that are happening in the robotics space the last 6 to 12 months are amazing, right? And I feel like we're at that point where we're now going to tip over, and this is really going to change how we operate and how we do business and what our workforces look like. So my prediction is that we are going to have not too distant future. I won't put a time frame on it, but in a not too distant future, I think we are genuinely going to have robots as part of our workforce. And that's really going to change how we think about how our workforces operate, how we govern them, all our processes. It's going to force a lot of rethinking in this area. But I think it's also going to make us think about what do robots do well and what do humans do well. And it's really going to change what our jobs look like and what we do and what we don't do. And I am really firmly hoping it means I will never write another email, that my robot is going to write that for me. I'm never going to open my inbox again. It's really going to take some of those tasks that we don't enjoy as much. And we're going to assign them to the robots that are brilliant at doing this. And people like myself will be doing the things that we're, more enjoy and take pleasure in doing every day as part of our jobs.
All right. Robots. The robots are coming.
The robots are coming. I love it. I can't wait. I was a big Flintstone fan as a child, so I'm ready. I've seen what the future is and I'm ready for it now. So, but I think with that comes a warning, right? So the flip side of that is the warning, right? Things are going to change and we have to be ready for that change. And I think when we think about change in workforce over the past century or so, things are changing so much faster now. And we know that. We're all very aware that things change much more rapidly now than what we did maybe, 10, 20, 50 years ago. Things change a lot slower. So I think now we have to keep up. And that is our real challenge, is we need to keep up. And if we don't, as organizations, keep up with changes that are happening, we're really going to be those that are left behind. And so it's really a warning to say, keep up with what's happening. You don't want to be left behind when everyone else is taking this as an opportunity.
An example of that is one of the episodes that we had previously was Adam Kogan, who's an AI expert.
Oh.
And he actually spoke at the Australian Payroll Association Summit, and I met him through that, which was great. Yeah. And he talked about this thing called OpenClaw, which was a bit new back then. This is back a couple of months ago. And since then, all the large language models have taken up their own version of OpenClaw, which is a personal messaging assistant on steroids, and have sort of made that a little bit safer. But that's only been a few months, and it's happened literally 2 months. Incredible, so quick.
As I said, things are changing so fast, and it's really hard to stay up with what is changing, and then do that thinking, that critical thinking about what does that mean to us as organizations? What does that mean to us from a compliance lens? What does that mean to us from a governance lens? What do we actually need to be thinking about here? And we used to have a lot of time to think. We used to have a set time aside, think, plan, execute, and now things are just changing so rapidly. It's really going to change what we do there and how we keep up with those changes as well. So I think it's exciting times, but it's also really scary in a lot of ways as well. So keen to see, in a year's time when we're talking, what are we going to be talking about?
It will be very interesting what we're talking about. and just going back to having that time to think, I remember, and sorry to bring up Mr. Zuckerberg from Facebook, but he sort of said, I manage my work so that I have time to stare out, like my people do the work and I have time to just stare out the window.
Yeah.
And when he stares out the window, that's when the magic happens. And working above the business, not even on the business, or in the business, he's sort of working above the business going, hang on, what's coming? And having more time to do that is necessary when everyone's just when things are accelerating so quickly.
Absolutely. And so I think that that's something we have to keep thinking about and keep making sure we're doing, is that thinking, the real critical thinking. And so it's how do we utilize things like AI? So if we've got AI, how can we get that to do the things it's really good at, to free ourselves up to do the more human things like that deep thinking and the planning and the imagining what's the workforce going to look like? What is my business going to look like? What's my dream? Where do I want this to go? And how are we going to get there as well? So doing that planning that's associated with it. We all got a dream. We've got to have that plan for how we're going to get to achieve that dream as well. So I think it's really important that we still take that time. We still do that thinking, but it's going to be more rapid. And we're going to have to keep rethinking as well. It's going to be a really agile thought process, because what we thought about 3 months ago, as you said, we had changes a few months ago that came in, and I remember doing some thinking about it, and my team, we were all sitting here and we're talking about lobsters, because OpenClaw, right? With lobsters, and we did lots of talking about lobsters as a team and thinking about that. And now things are changing again. And so it's how do you keep up with that as well? So I think that's really important for all leaders to be thinking about as well.
I bet you're a big one for visualization.
Oh, I do love visualization. I do.
When you said to imagine what it is.
Yes. And you know what? I think there's something to be said for the good old school whiteboard.
Yeah.
Go on whiteboard things, put it out there, and as a team, sit there and think about what do you want things to be like, how are we going to get there, and what are those crazy ideas? Because you know what? They're not so crazy anymore, a lot of them. Things that we would have said, a bit strange 5 years ago, now we say, that's actually real, or that's actually happening, or that's something that's well within our grasp to make it happen as well. So yeah, I do love a bit of a let's think big picture here and let's figure out where we're going.
Exciting times. Now, what's one thing that leaders need to know about that you haven't covered yet in this podcast about workforce governance?
Oh, okay. I think that the one thing I would probably call out is that I think people think that workforce governance is often almost theatrical. It's big, it's cumbersome, it's dramatic, and often it always gets in the way, right? But I'd like all leaders to think about workforce governance as being something where it's in the background and it's supporting and just changing our thoughts about what it means and what it means on a day-to-day basis, and what that also translates into for a experience for all of our workforce as well. So I think I'd rather just challenge everyone to change their thinking and say, when you think about governance, it shouldn't be hard. It should actually be easy, and it should be making your life easier. So please do make sure that you're investing in it and considering how important it is, because especially with how quickly things are changing at the moment, it's even more critical right now to be really investing in that area.
Well, Stacey, thank you so much for this chat. It's certainly been illuminating, and I look forward to chatting to you again in probably a shorter time than we think.
Possibly shorter. Thanks for having me, Dave. It was great to chat to you.
Good on you, Stacey. See you later. Bye-bye. Evolving Workforce was proudly brought to you by OHI, specialists in workforce management, award interpretation and payroll compliance, delivering new certainty. This podcast was recorded on the land of the Gadigal people. If you enjoyed this podcast, why not send to a friend or a colleague? And remember to hit follow on your podcast player to get every episode as they drop every Wednesday. Thanks for listening. I've been Dave Kenyon, and this is Evolving Workforce.